We're moving on to the Moscow story. For those who are not aware, there was an attack at a concert venue in Moscow. Now, there have been a number of claims about who actually orchestrated that attack. Vladimir Putin is blaming Ukraine. Kamala Harris and the State Department are blaming ISIS. That's right. ISIS is back in the news again, right? Who do you think is responsible? Let's first get started with this clip here from Sky News. And let's dive right in.
2 men have been charged in connection with Friday's attack on a concert venue just outside Moscow. Authorities now say at least 137 people died after 4 gunmen fired at concert goers before setting the building on fire. Well, today was declared a national day of mourning for the victims. The Islamic State group has released graphic footage which appears to back up its claim of responsibility. But Vladimir Putin has suggested Ukraine was involved. Here's our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg.
In Moscow, wherever you looked, wherever you turned, you could see this was a country in mourning and in shock. Across Russia, flags flew at half-mast for the victims of the concert hall massacre. And at the scene of Friday's attack, Crocus City Hall, the queues grew longer and longer. The National Day of Mourning experienced most acutely here. There was an outpouring of sympathy, a mountain of tributes to the dead.
As well as leaving flowers and candles, people have also been bringing soft toys and sweets, because amongst the dead, there were children. They've also been leaving messages. One is addressed to the attackers, and it reads, "You are scum. We will never forgive you."
Let's go ahead and fast forward a little bit here. Yeah, it's really sad. There were actually kids that were victims as well at this concert hall. I just want to fast forward because I know. Okay, this is the part that I want to get to. There have actually been 2 of those attackers have been taken into custody. Now, Vladimir Putin is saying that they apparently were trying to escape to Ukraine. So let's go ahead and dive into these 2 attackers that have been taken into custody.
The suspected gunman appeared in court. Russia claims they'd been caught fleeing to Ukraine and had contacts there. Kiev fiercely denies any link to the attack. The Islamic State group says it was behind the shooting. And on this day of mourning, silent prayers from a somber-looking President Putin. The Kremlin says he lit a candle for the victims in church at his country estate. And Russia is praying that there will be no more attacks. If there are, that will test people's faith in the president to keep them safe. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Yeah, BBC. I think I said Sky News. I think I decided against the Sky News clip. So yeah, all four are in custody. So again, notice what they said. They said that they were trying to flee to Ukraine, which is what Vladimir Putin had mentioned, that he thought that it was Ukraine that actually did this. Now, this is interesting. Just want to make sure I have the right clip here. Hold on, let me see something. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. So listen to this, because it says Moscow concert hall attack suspects appear in court. So let's go ahead and dive into this here. Again, this is more recent information.
Russia's president claims that Friday's attack on a Moscow concert hall was the work of radical Islamists. 139 people died either from gunshot wounds, stab wounds, or intense heat. Vladimir Putin suggested that Ukraine may have played a role in the attack and that somehow a path had been prepared for the attackers to return to Ukraine. He offered no evidence of this. Putin says his investigators are trying to determine the primary instigator of the attack.
Let me pause here for a second about no evidence, because I want to point out something here. And a number of videos that I watched said the same thing. You know, he had no evidence to prove that. But none of these pundits or talking heads said that the U.S. government had no evidence to prove that Vladimir Putin was the one that actually killed Alexei Navalny. And they didn't have any evidence. They just stated it as fact. But none of those pundits, even the Western, the European media, none of them said Biden administration has no evidence to prove this. And that goes to show you again, even when it comes to international media, particularly the European media that is a part of NATO or that is an ally of the United States, is still controlled by the United States. So don't get it twisted. The US still controls media abroad as well.
Joining us now to discuss more is terrorism analyst Tom Akaitis. Tom, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
What would ISIS's motivation be, and how, I mean, you think of Moscow, especially during wartime, being pretty locked down. How did this happen?
Well, it was locked down in one sense. After 9/11, all countries around the world got very good at protecting against a mass attack like we suffered. They protect government buildings, etc. But concert halls and venues have been hit repeatedly. We saw that in Paris, we saw it in Manchester, and we saw it here. I'm also not the least surprised that the 4 people arrested were Tajiks. Another was from Kyrgyzstan. I've been to both countries, and the reason the U.S. had me there teaching a counterterrorism course was because we knew it was a fertile recruiting ground, first for Al-Qaeda, now for ISIS, because of the way Muslims have been treated, first in the Soviet Union and now in the Russian Federation.
Pause. 2 things there. Number one, they had him teach in this country to prevent people from, I guess, being a part of those quote unquote extremist groups, right? And one of them he refers to as ISIS. But you have to remember, ISIS doesn't exist without the United States government overthrowing Saddam Hussein. So this is another example to point to why our government should not meddle in foreign affairs. They should not implement regime changes in these countries. They should have nothing to do with that. Without the removal of Saddam Hussein, you do not have an ISIS. Now, we're going to go to the statement from Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to read this to you because he is speaking in Russian. But this is what he said about the attack. Listen to this.
Никто и ничто не может поколебать нашу сплоченность и волю, нашу решимость и мужество, силу единого народа России. Никому не удастся посеять ядовитые семена розни, панику и разлад в наше многонациональное общество. Россия не раз проходила через
Russia has repeatedly gone through difficult, sometimes unbearable trials.
тяжелейшие, порой невыносимые испытания, но становилось еще
But it has become even stronger. It will be so now.
сильнее. Так будет и сейчас. Все исполнители, организаторы и
All the perpetrators, planners, and those who ordered this
заказчики
crime
этого преступления понесут справедливое и не
will be rightfully and inevitably punish, whoever they are and whoever directed them. And remember, he believes that Ukraine was the one that is responsible for this. When I first heard about this story, I was like, sounds like something the CIA would do. And why would I say that? To distract you and to make you fear Islam and to make you fear Muslim people and to take away the solidarity that you have for the Palestinian people and to get you to fear and resent Muslim people. And in turn, turn around and support Israel.
Неизбежное наказание. Кем бы они ни были, кто бы их ни направлял. Повторю. Мы установим и покараем каждого, кто стоит за спиной террористов, кто готовил это злодеяние, этот удар по России, по нашему.
Pause there. Those who stood behind the terrorists who prepared this attack against Russia, against our people. Okay, so yeah, I mean, he was very very clear there. And like I said, he thinks that Ukraine has done this. Kamala Harris actually was asked about this recently in an interview that she had with ABC News. Listen to her response.
Vladimir Putin is already trying to link this to Ukraine and say that Ukraine is responsible. Does the U.S. have any evidence to back that up?
No. And first, let me start by saying what has happened in an act of terrorism and the number of people who've been killed is obviously a tragedy, and we should all send our condolences to those families. No, there is no whatsoever any evidence. And in fact, what we know to be the case is that ISIS-K is actually, by all accounts, responsible for what happened.
But there was also no evidence. Again, notice none of these reporters, when they talked about what happened with Alexei Navalny, none of these reporters asked the Biden administration if they had any evidence that Vladimir Putin was behind the death of Alexei Navalny. None of them did. None of them asked, you got evidence? Like, show me something that says that at all. Nothing. So again, this just goes to show you, like I said before, these people are not journalists. These people are State Department puppets, and they are put in place to just repeat State Department talking points. I don't think any of these commentators, these interviewers are actually doing any research on their own. Again, they're just regurgitating those talking points that they really want you to hear. Because why wouldn't you ask that question, right? Why wouldn't you be fair about that? Be fair on both sides, which they are not. And so this is where it gets a little sticky, because we pivot to John Kirby. And I want you to pay attention to what he says in this statement here. You know, they're acting like they're surprised by this. But in this first video clip that you'll see here of John Kirby, he actually admits that, again, the U.S. Embassy had warned Americans in that area to be wary of shopping malls and concert halls, etc. In fact, that warning apparently went out on my birthday, March 8th. So they warned people then. It is now March 26th. So pay attention to what he says here, because it actually contradicts his response in the second video.
First, before I go through what I prepared to talk about, obviously we've all seen the reports in the video coming out of Moscow, this violent shooting at looks like a shopping mall. Can't speak much to the details of it. I mean, this was all just breaking before I came on out here, so we're trying to get more information, but really would refer to Russian authorities to speak to it. The images are just horrible and just hard to watch, and our thoughts obviously are going to be with the victims of this terrible, terrible shooting attack. And I think, you know, you look at that video if you have, and you got to recognize that there's some moms and dads and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters that haven't gotten the news yet, and this is going to be a tough day. So our thoughts are with them. You might have also seen, hopefully you saw the State Department or embassy there put out a notice to all Americans in Moscow to avoid any large gathering, concerts, obviously shopping malls, anything like that.
So you heard what he said, right? Our state embassy had put out that warning. Okay.
Just for their own safety, they should stay put where they are and stay plugged into the State Department for any additional updates and information. I'm afraid that's really all I have on that. Now, in Ukraine, today Russia launched a massive wave of missiles.
Okay. He said that was all that he had on that. Now, however, when he is approached by one of the reporters, I want you to hear what John Kirby is going to say. You see, sometimes they can't keep up with their own lies, but the rest of us are keeping up with their lies. Watch how he contradicts himself.
Thank you. So question, did the U.S. have prior knowledge of this attack in Moscow, given that the U.S. Embassy had issued warning beforehand?
I'm not aware of any advanced knowledge that we had of this terrible attack.
On March 8th, the embassy warns of imminent attack in Moscow by extremists.
Yeah, I think that I'll let the State Department speak to that. But I don't think that was related to this specific attack.
Thank you. So question, did the U.S. have prior knowledge of this attack in Moscow, given that the U.S. Embassy had issued warning beforehand?
Did the U.S. have prior knowledge of this attack because the U.S. Embassy had issued a warning beforehand?
I'm not aware of any advanced knowledge that we had of this terrible attack.
On March 8th, the embassy warns of imminent attack in Moscow by extremists.
Yeah, I think that I'll let the State Department speak to that. But I don't think that was related to this specific attack.
Passes the buck to the State Department. So pay attention here, folks. And I got a question for you. How did the U.S. government know when they actually sent out that message from the U.S. Embassy? How did they know that they were expecting to have some type of extremist attack in Moscow and they were able to notify Americans on March 8th? How did they know that was going to happen? I mean, it's just, see, they think that we're not paying attention to what they say, but we are paying attention to what they say. They even repeat it in this clip here from News Nation. Like, this is repeated today, talking about the threat of ISIS-K following Russia's deadly Moscow concert hall attack. I asked NSC John Kirby about the warning from the U.S. Central Command Chief and why some Republicans fear the attack could. Listen to this.
U.S. intelligence officials say ISIS-K has the capability and the will to attack the U.S. in as little as 6 months.
And we asked the White House, Nicole, about this very concern. They told us, quote, right now, we don't see any credible threat by ISIS to the American homeland. But they say that is not something they are taking for granted here. They say they are monitoring this threat. And the U.S. warned Russia in early March of the planned terror attack and says ISIS bears the sole responsibility. And
Bingo! Did you hear what she said? So she just told you the U.S. warned Russia. They warned the U.S. Embassy, okay? The U.S. Embassy warned them early in March of the attack. So I don't know, maybe I'm just hearing things, but I think we need to pay attention to what has happened in the past couple of days. And I think George Galloway points to that so well. We have to remember who was just recently in the UK, and that was Barack Obama. And I told you, what is Barack Obama doing in the UK meeting with the prime minister? He's not the president. George Galloway puts it so well. Listen to this.
The US and the UK and others swiftly tried to reassure me that it was only ISIS that carried out this mass murder in Moscow. I knew automatically that they were lying. And here's what I'm finding. I'm finding, first of all, that no one has explained the unannounced visit of President Barack Obama to meet British political and security officials in 10 Downing Street 3 days before this terrorist crime was carried out.
Yes, guys, that's what we have to pay attention to. I'm sorry, if Barack Obama is added to the equation at some point or another, you got to start second guessing some things because it is a little strange, right?
Working further back, I discovered that Victoria Newland, that harbinger of death, that angel of death, who, if she comes anywhere near you, be sure a civil war is coming in your country. I saw her with my own eyes, promised the Russians some nasty surprises in the next few weeks and months. I'm working further back, and I discover that the White House spokesman, John Kirby, announced that American citizens had been warned to stay away from crowded places, including shopping malls and theaters. And so I have 4 pieces of evidence in my mind that leads me to believe that the United States, that the NATO allies and their proxy servant, the state of Ukraine, the remaining state of Ukraine, were in fact responsible for this mass murder.
To me, it just didn't make any sense for ISIS to get involved here. I'm just keeping it real. You know, like they're not even, people don't even talk about them anymore. All of a sudden, they're like a thing now. I don't know. I just, like Quab says, CIA all day. Yeah, to me, it's a little sus to me. And I definitely don't trust what the Biden administration is saying right now. I mean, these are the same. Just think about this, guys. Our government lied to us about the war in Iraq. They lied to people about the war in Vietnam. Like, they've been lying to you over and over and over again. I don't know why people would continue to just take them at their word, especially when it comes to foreign affairs.